All right, welcome everybody to our special ITA webcast about teaching English abroad in the Middle East. My name is John. Super pumped to be here to discuss teaching in the Middle East, and also super pumped to have my friend and colleague Ahmed, who has roots in the region, who taught English in Dubai. Ahmed, how you doing? Glad to have you.
I'm doing well. I'm excited to finally be doing this. People have been interested in this sort of webcast for a while, so I'm glad we can finally give it to them.
All right, well, we got a lot of ground, so let's get started. We got two of us here hosting you for this broadcast. My name is John. I'm a senior writer, blogger for ITA. I'm also an original member of the team. I'm originally from Southern California, but I was lucky enough to grow up in Cairo, Egypt, a truly fantastic city. And I was lucky enough, to live, work, and travel in the Middle East extensively from an early age. So I still consider that part of the world to be home in many respects, and I'm super pumped to be discussing it today with everybody. Ahmed, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit here?
Yeah, I am Ahmed. I'm an admissions advisor here at ITA. I taught English in Dubai in the UAE for 5 years. I was actually born in the Gulf as well, in Kuwait, to Palestinian parents. I hold dual citizenship, U.S. Jordanian, so I've been to Jordan plenty of times. My parents actually live there again now, so I visit regularly. And so, yeah, I've traveled a whole bunch through the region, and I'm excited to share my insights and experiences.
All right, well, let's give folks a quick rundown of what we'll be covering here. We'll introduce ourselves as International TEFL Academy and discuss, so we can help people realize their goals of teaching English in the Middle East and elsewhere. We'll be talking about what are some of the basic requirements that schools are looking for when they hire teachers in this part of the world. We'll type about different types of jobs that you can work in, different types of schools. We'll discuss some of the top job markets in terms of countries and what they offer in terms of salaries and how things work in terms of visas and hiring and that sort of stuff. We'll be discussing TEFL certification options. So one of the great things about teaching English abroad is you don't always need to have prior teaching experience. TEFL certification will provide you with the training and qualifications you need to get hired in most markets around the world. We'll go over some top FAQs and Q&As. All right, so to begin with, here at International TEFL Academy, we are a world leader in TEFL certification training for teaching English abroad. We are very pleased to be recognized as a leader in this field. We've won numerous awards in just the past couple of years. Definitely check out our reviews on different third-party websites. You'll get lots of great insights, not only about us, but about the whole field of teaching English abroad and the experiences that it offers. So moving on.
All right, so our team here is amazing. Our staff here at ITA, we have all lived, worked, and traveled extensively. Most of us have taught abroad. I think combined, we have all been to over 80 countries around the world. All of our amazing professors who we have for our courses all have at least a master's. Some of them have a PhD in TESOL or linguistics or another related field, and years of teaching experience, years of experience in international education. We all want you to love this and the idea of this just as much as we do, because speaking for myself, I know that I definitely love this and love to help people also get to experience this.
Yeah, that's right. Teaching English abroad, it's an amazing experience. But why would people want to teach in the Middle East specifically? And I think there are tons of reasons. It's a high demand, fast growing job market. So in the Middle East, as in many other parts of the world, people need and want to learn English. It's critical in many fields to gain employment. It opens lots of doors for people personally and in terms of their education and their professional opportunities. So there's just fast growing in demand throughout the region, and that means there are lots of opportunities for native and fluent speakers to teach English in the Middle East and get paid for it. Obviously, fantastic history and culture. A lot of these countries and civilizations have been around literally since the beginning of time. And there's tons to experience in terms of music, literature, architecture, cuisine, some of the world's, most colorful and fantastic cities are located in the Middle East, whether it's Cairo or Dubai or Beirut or what have you. You can learn Arabic or possibly another language. Arabic is a fantastic language. It's one of the most widely spoken languages in the world. It's a very rich and beautiful language. So if you're interested in learning Arabic, hey, go to the Middle East. You can teach English and you can work on your Arabic while you're at it. Lots of fantastic travel opportunities. A lot of these countries, they're very close together. It's very easy to travel. Europe, in many cases, is only a couple hours away by plane. You can even take a boat in some cases. And a lot of these jobs, especially in the Persian Gulf, as we'll be discussing, offer great salaries and benefits. You may receive free housing or paid vacation or airfare, health insurance. So you can get paid well to live in certain countries. In other countries, you may not make as much, but you're definitely going to have the experience of a lifetime. And last but certainly not least, as a teacher, you'll make a difference in the lives of your students. As I mentioned, learning English is a way to open doors for themselves, and you will be helping them achieve one of their life's goals by helping them learn English, and it can be an incredibly rewarding experience.
All right, so let us discuss the basic hiring requirements for teaching English across the Middle East. We're going to start with degree requirements. Bottom line, most countries will require a BA. In certain cases, like the Persian Gulf countries, like the UAE and Bahrain and Qatar, they might even require or at least prefer a master's degree or years of experience as well in teaching. A four-year degree is typically required in countries like Tunisia and Morocco and in North Africa, and then Turkey and Jordan as well. But there are some opportunities for you to teach without a degree at all. It will vary for different language schools in Egypt. There might be some opportunities in some other countries as well. And then, of course, and this has become a huge industry, teaching English online is a great way to make money remotely and live anywhere. So that's always an option, as well as private lessons, tutoring. You can post your services on various message boards in that country, start, putting together a clientele of students who you see regularly. Even as a full-time employee in Dubai, I also private tutored.
Right, and depending on the country where you're applying for a job or the job itself, there are other requirements, bureaucracy of sorts you may have to go through. You may need to get a criminal background check, usually from the FBI if you're an American. You may get various health and drug tests. This is more common, I'd say, in Persian Gulf countries than in countries like Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and so forth, although it's just going to depend on the job, but it's something that you should be prepared to handle. Luckily, all ITA students and graduates have our student affairs department providing job search guidance, and they will work with you on, figuring all of this out and, how to get the right background check and so forth. So you do receive, a lot of guidance when you get certified with ITA.
All right, so as you probably assumed and what led you here, but gaining an accredited, respected TEFL certification is going to be a major key when it comes to getting a great teaching job anywhere in the world, and definitely in the Middle East as well. We will be talking a little bit more about TEFL certification itself and the different options that we have here at ITA a little bit later in the broadcast, but here are some, I would say, key points for you to sort of get started on why TEFL certification is important. For one, it is a requirement in a lot of cases, and this has become super common in the last decade. I can speak from personal experience. 10 years ago, when I started teaching abroad in Dubai right after I graduated, it was not as much of a requirement. During the time that I was there, it became a requirement. There are schools who are looking to hire teachers who have the proper training and qualifications so that they know that their students are receiving the best quality of teaching. And it's also important to take a TEFL class that meets or exceeds international standards, especially for countries in the Persian Gulf, which also happen to be some of the most popular and competitive markets, because the requirements there are very strict and the job market is, like I said, very, very competitive. There are people, they're smaller cities, so they have slightly smaller markets. They have enough opportunities there, but a lot of people going for the same opportunities.
Yeah, can't stress TEFL certification enough. All right, so let's look at some of the different types of jobs and schools that you can work at as an English teacher in the Middle East. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of variety, different types of schools catering to different types of students. I'd say a lot of opportunities, across the board are going to be in private language schools. So these are typically private enterprises that specialize often in language training. They may offer other, sort of corporate type classes or what have you, just depends on the school. They're less likely to operate according to a strict academic calendar, so they're not all hiring according to, let's say, a typical September start date for the school year. A lot of them do, but it will vary somewhat. In countries like Egypt, some of these schools are going to hire teachers locally in person on the ground. So if you find yourself in Cairo and you want to teach, you can reach out to local language schools using the various resources that we provide at ITA and set up interviews locally. In other parts of the region, like the Persian Gulf, usually you're interviewing in advance. We'll talk more about that later. And in some cases, if you're working at a school, you may be teaching a class of, let's say, people in business or university students, or perhaps even children. In some cases, you may be sent out to provide private lessons to individual students or small groups.
All right, next up we have universities and international schools. I feel very comfortable discussing this because I taught myself at a private American accredited international school in Dubai. And so my students, they were not necessarily American. They were from all over the place, including local Emiratis and students from other parts of the Middle East and in some cases Europe and wherever. But these are types of schools where you can expect to receive a sort of international education that's catered to students eventually going abroad themselves to study at colleges in like the US, whatever. Universities present opportunities for sure. I know in Dubai, there was no shortage of different types of colleges and all of that. These types of opportunities, they typically maintain strict hiring requirements and are looking for things like a master's degree or a background in education with maybe, US licensing or UK licensing as a teacher. And some of them will ask for at least 2 years of previous experience teaching. But if you meet those requirements, you will receive some pretty good benefits like, housing or a housing stipend sometimes. I received housing myself. It was free. It was an apartment all for myself and my wife. A lot of times you get airfare. I did. I even received annual round trip airfare back to Chicago and then back to Dubai every summer for every year that I decided to stay on. And you get paid vacation, you get, pretty good health insurance. In a majority of the cases, you should expect to interview for these types of positions in advance. So you need to give yourself months in advance for you to go through that whole process of applying and interviewing and hearing back and comparing offers and figuring things out.
Right. And getting TEFL certified, for example.
Of course.
All right. Teaching English online, private tutoring. We've touched on this briefly, but really teaching English online especially is just exploding in terms of the opportunities that it offers. Teaching English online offers a lot of flexibility in terms of your schedule. So we have a lot of ITA graduates who are basically teaching English online full-time and traveling from country to country. Basically, you need a good internet connection and a place to set up your virtual classroom, and you're pretty much good to go. People who are working part-time or full-time at language schools or at other types of schools often teach English online as a way to make extra money, and also offering private lessons. So Ahmed mentioned that when he was teaching in Dubai, he also gave private lessons. So lots of opportunities for that. That's a great way to meet locals on a more individual level in many cases. meet folks in the community and so forth. One thing about teaching English online is that you can do it from home before you go abroad. So it's a good way to, one, get some teaching experience under your belt, and also a way to begin making money to help you cover any startup costs that you might have. And I'd say typically for teaching English online, most first-time teachers are making between $18 and $20 an hour, roughly. Now, a lot of these lessons are 40 minutes or 30 minutes or even 20 minutes, so you're not always paid by the hour per se. But that's roughly what you're looking at making. And in some of these Middle Eastern countries where the cost of living is low, that can really, you can support yourself and live quite well making a salary like that. When it comes to private lessons, salaries are going to vary a lot more depending on the market and the types of students that you're looking to work with.
And just as a side note, before we talk about the job interviews, in Dubai, I was charging close to, and you're going to think this is crazy, but close to $100 per hour for private lessons. And students were willing to pay that, and parents were willing to pay that because that was the average price that other teachers were also charging students for private lessons. So I wasn't like overcharging anyone, but that was kind of crazy. So that definitely came in handy whenever I needed to do that.
Yeah, for sure. But bear in mind, if you're in maybe Tunisia or let's say Lebanon, you may not be making that much. It's going to depend on the market. But either way, regardless of where you are, it's a great way to make some extra cash and get experience on the side.
Absolutely. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about job interviews. Understanding how interviews work is going to be a very important part of your research and planning for your move abroad. Obviously, you should be planning to talk to an advisor like myself here at ITA, just to check out the different country profiles and learn some more information about the countries and how they operate and what you should be expecting in terms of interviews and interview options in some cases where you could potentially interview in advance or in person. And then you will also learn a little bit more about how it works overall. These are some basics right here, these bullet points for you to keep in mind. Most schools in the Middle East hire in advance, meaning you are at home or anywhere applying, interviewing all in advance, especially jobs in the Persian Gulf. It is very rare, probably never happens or almost never happens where you can get hired on the ground in a place like Dubai. So be prepared for interviewing in the spring for jobs at, say, universities and international schools that would want you to start late summer or fall. That was my case. I started with orientation very late in the summer, and that ended up, very, very similar, I would say, to the way that teaching works here at public and private schools in the U.S. New teachers start, they orient over the summer, at the end of summer, and then you begin the semester in September or so. There are opportunities to interview locally if that feels like more of your style. You want to interview face-to-face. You could definitely do that in countries like Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Jordan, and Lebanon. And in these countries, there are also opportunities to line up, interviews or to have the actual interview itself in advance over video chat or phone call.
All right, visas. So visas, let's face it, they're bureaucratic. They can be technical sometimes. They're going to vary from country to country, even from job to job. Definitely, I'd say in most countries, especially in the Persian Gulf, your employer is going to sponsor your visa. They're going to help you get it processed. They're going to tell you what paperwork you need to fill out and what size picture you need to send to the embassy to get your visa and all that sort of stuff. And of course, we also have our team here at ITA that works with all of our students and graduates in figuring that out as well. Sometimes if you're getting hired through a recruiter, they may play some sort of role, but typically you're getting your visa sponsored by your employer. If you're getting hired locally in a country like Egypt, sometimes you may just be working on a tourist visa. It may not technically be legal, but it's very common. In other cases, even if you're hired locally, they still might sponsor a visa for you. It's just gonna vary from country to country and from job to job. This is one of those areas that you want to talk to your advisor about and look at those country profiles and the country chart on our website to learn more about how visas work in particular countries. Those who are teaching English strictly online, or maybe just giving private lessons and teaching online, you can often do that without having a work visa, although it will be more difficult in Gulf countries for sure. But certainly there are people in places like Egypt and Jordan and North Africa and so forth who are basically teaching online and private lessons, and they're not on any sort of a work visa. It's just going to depend. All right, so now that we've learned about some of the technical stuff, let's talk about some specific countries and regions. One great thing about the Middle East, there's a lot of variety in terms of the countries where you can work and what they offer in terms of not only teaching jobs, but the experience of living there itself. So in terms of the local culture and the history and the food and all of that. So lots of great options. Ahmed, why don't you kick us off here with your old stomping grounds, the UAE?
Absolutely. So the UAE is, I would say, probably the most popular teaching market in the region, just because they've sort of established themselves as a world leader on a number of different fronts. They are technologically advanced and very modern and westernized and have Guinness Book of World Records for just about everything. So, Abu Dhabi and Dubai are probably the two biggest emirates or states in the UAE that come to mind. They are the most popular by far and also offer the most in terms of opportunities. They're known for shopping, fantastic shopping for sure. The Dubai Mall is the biggest mall in the world, and the Mall of the Emirates has an indoor ski slope. So definitely shopping, infrastructure, architecture, that's all amazing. Dining is wonderful, and you get a variety of different foods from different parts of the Middle East and also local Persian Gulf food, but also international cuisine. It's a great place to eat and hang out and socialize. And the large expatriate population. I mean, in the UAE alone, I think local Emiratis make up only 18% of the population of the whole country or something like that. Everyone else is from somewhere else. And you run into people from all types of places, including maybe even your home city or your hometown. Competitive job markets for sure. So you need to definitely plan to have all of your ducks in a row and make sure you meet all of the types of requirements and preferences. So they might ask for advanced credentials on top of your TEFL certification. You might have better opportunities in smaller emirates or states like Sharjah. I had friends who I taught with in Dubai who moved to Sharjah or moved to Ajman, which is another emirate. They're still in the UAE. They're, no more than a 45-minute drive from like downtown Dubai. So they're not bad options if you are really, really set on being in the UAE, but might not meet the requirements for Dubai or Abu Dhabi specifically. They're also known for, and this is probably the biggest draw, high salaries and great benefits. You get housing, you get airfare. Those are common, I would say almost typical, and the ability to save depending on the emirate you're in and the type of school you're in, anywhere from $800 on the low end to upwards of $2,000 on the higher end per month. And most of the jobs are available in advance. I would say it's probably rare, like I mentioned earlier, to find a job in the UAE on the ground.
All right, and lots of other options in the region. I don't know what's up with this guy, this donkey, but Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar. These are countries that they're similar to the UAE in many respects. A lot of them are, oil-rich countries. In many cases, they're basically city-states, so small, small markets, especially when you compare to them to, like, say, the big job markets in East Asia and so forth. They, in many respects, can offer a similar experience to the UAE in terms of a lot of these cities, modern infrastructure, cosmopolitan in terms of shopping and eating and having large expatriate communities and so forth. Saudi Arabia is definitely the largest job market in the region. It's the biggest country. It also tends to be less competitive. It doesn't have nearly the sex appeal that, let's say, Dubai and Abu Dhabi have, in part because it's a more conservative culture and so forth. That said, there are 100,000 Americans living in Saudi Arabia, so huge expatriate population there as well. One country that I'm very fond of is Oman, which offers, I think, a lot more history and than some of the other options in the Gulf. Beautiful coastlines,
Beautiful.
attractive cities, great food, and so forth. These are other countries where you can still get high salaries and benefits. Requirements are going to be similar in terms of requiring a degree. Very often, native English speakers are preferred, TEFL certification, and so forth. You're interviewing in advance. You get your visa sponsored by your employer in most cases. So a lot of other options. As Ahmed mentioned, the UAE can be very competitive. So if you want a similar experience, you want to teach in that part of the world, be flexible, apply to opportunities throughout the region, and it'll be more likely to have some success. Ahmed, when you were living in the region, did you know other people who were teaching in some of these places? Did you have opportunities to travel to them and so forth?
Absolutely. So I have only from these been to Oman and Kuwait because I was born there and I don't remember a lot about it, but I went to Oman a lot because anytime I had someone visiting and their tourist visa was about to expire, we would head to Oman, which is a decent drive from Dubai, not too bad. It's about an hour and a half away, and help them sort of refresh their tourist visa. So I got a chance to check it out. We had a friend, my wife and I, at our school, and she was an English teacher, and she was offered a much better salary than she was getting paid in Dubai with better benefits in Oman. So definitely don't discount it. I had another friend who had moved to Dubai from Bahrain and was teaching in our school, and he loved it and missed it dearly. So these opportunities are great. I mean, you're talking about Qatar, for example, who is they're hosting the World Cup. So like these are places that have culture and infrastructure and modernity and offer a lot of the great things that you could find in the UAE with similar salaries and abilities to save and abilities to live in that region and short flights to Dubai. I think Qatar to Dubai is like a 45-minute flight or something. So you could definitely be in that region if you sort of expand and apply far and wide.
Yeah, and you can easily get to Dubai and do your indoor skiing at the mall if you
Totally.
if you really want to.
Fans.
All right, let's move on to another part of the region here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jordan and Lebanon, this is the part of the world that my family is from. And so I'm always excited about talking to people about these countries in particular. Jordan, my parents live there, and I have plenty of family there. And so I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time there, both as a kid going there during summers and as an adult visiting my parents. And it's really, really a beautiful part of the world with tons of ancient history and also tons of huge and populous and cool cities with tons of things to do. They are smaller countries in general, so the markets are smaller, but the demand is definitely there. I know this for a fact because in my experience there, I've had relatives tell me, well, why don't you come teach English here? And things like that. So I know that there's demand for it and people are interested in the idea and that it's a popular thing. So jobs happen to be concentrated in larger cities, as you can imagine. So cities like Amman, which is the big city in Jordan, and that's where my parents are. It's a great city, tons to do there, great food, young spirit. It's progressing at a very, very amazing rate right now. Beirut in Lebanon also comes to mind as an awesome option. Once known as the Paris of the Middle East, it's got a coastline and tons of cool things to do and see and eat and kind of French colonial history mixed with ancient stuff, and so it's very cool. So you get all of those. You get the rich cultural traditions, you get the history, but you also get modern cities with a lot of things going on. However, unlike the Gulf of the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, you can expect to break even here. So salaries, they're not going to allow for you to save a whole lot. It might happen maybe at some of the more competitive, like international private schools and stuff, but for the most part, you should expect to break even. And there are, I would say, most opportunities available on the ground. So you would have to physically be there and interview through, face-to-face interviews. And that's something that we at ITA will help you with in terms of helping you and getting you connected and figuring out where the different schools are and things like that, where you should be targeting and where you should be applying to. But there are some opportunities to apply and interview in advance as well.
All right. Moving on to North Africa and Morocco and Tunisia, two places, especially Tunisia, that you might necessarily think of as a great place to teach English, but these are, pretty strong markets in terms of demand. These nations were both colonized by France. Historically, France has had a lot of influence culturally, and French has traditionally been the second language in these countries, but this is now switching, as it is in many parts of the world, slowly but surely, to English. So there is, quite high demand for English teachers. Again, you're going to have a slightly different culture than you would in say, the Levant or Egypt or the Gulf. North African culture, Berber culture, is very distinct, and it's mixed with obviously Arab and also, as we mentioned, French influence. Most jobs here are going to require a degree. In some cases, you're going to get hired in advance, but mostly, I would say, on the ground. Locally, a lot of these cities in this part of the world, Tunis, Rabat, Marrakesh, and so forth, again, have a lot to offer in terms of good quality of life, great eating and shopping, and so forth. So, hey, if you're looking for a great experience, these are definitely options to consider.
All right. Next up, we have Turkey, which is a very, very interesting and beautiful place. And if you've never been, I highly recommend it. I've been twice, and I've been stunned both times at not only the beauty, but this like amazing marriage of East and West. It is technically the Middle East. It is kind of right there, but it's also Europe, and it sort of straddles Europe and Asia both. So you get a very cool blend of different things happening in Turkey. And it's not maybe as big of a market now as it has been in the past, but it still offers great opportunities for TEFL certified teachers. We actually, just a couple weeks ago, had an Istanbul meetup for our alumni in Istanbul, and it was beautiful, and they look like they're having so much fun there. So it is, a pretty cool place to be. Even with the market slowing down because of political tensions and stuff, you still have opportunities there. I would say that's probably what's happening there is probably not enough to discourage most people. It's not unlike some other parts of the world as well. Most of the jobs are found locally through interviewing face to face. And as such, we have a class there, and we will talk about that a little bit later, our Istanbul class. There are some opportunities to interview in advance. That has happened before. You can expect breaking even, but again, like we discussed earlier, with things like teaching English online and private tutoring, there are always opportunities to make a little bit more money. And it is an unbeatable combination of history, cuisine, archaeology, natural beauty. If you leave Istanbul and go to some of the other cities, you find all types of amazing stuff. You're right on the Mediterranean. There's all types of things happening. Even many of the most famous dishes in other parts of the Middle East actually owe it to Turkey, because a lot of the cuisine was created in the Middle East through the Ottoman Empire and then kind of spread through the region. So you get a lot of very, very cool stuff happening there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Turkey. I went there on my honeymoon. That's how much I like it. Yeah, and the food is top notch, for sure. All right, Egypt. So this is a place, again, near and dear to my heart. I grew up in Cairo, very fond of it. Egypt is, it's the largest country in the Middle East and in the Arab world by far, in terms of population, and it's a major hub when it comes to not only trade, but culture, film, music, literature. Egypt's been at the center of that, really literally since ancient times. So it has a lot to offer in terms of history and culture and so forth. Jobs are really going to vary when it comes to, how you're going to find them or get hired. You can always look for jobs in advance or go interview face to face. A lot of jobs are with local language schools. There are all sorts of international schools popping up. They all like to put American somewhere in the name if they don't have any American teachers or any American students, but all sorts of international jobs and language academies as well. Most jobs you're going to break even financially. That said, if you do get a job with an international school of some type or even a university, you can make extra money to save. You can live in Egypt on the cheap if you want to. So teaching English online is another way to make and save extra money, and you can, live in Egypt basically indefinitely doing that if you wish. And again, just if you're interested in architecture and history and, really immersing yourself in the Middle East and in the Arab world, Cairo's definitely, or Egypt is definitely a top option for that.
All right, so next we have Israel and Palestine. We have the Holy Land. As I mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, my family is from Palestine. This is the part of the world that I have the deepest connection to, I would say. There are smaller job markets, as you would imagine, mostly with break-even salaries, and in some cases, volunteer opportunities, as is the case with Palestine. So Palestine has, I would say, in terms of like the West Bank, a mix of both paid and some volunteer opportunities. So for people interested in, say, volunteering, they just want to live there and kind of help out. I have personally come across many, many, many opportunities to do that. So it definitely exists, and you can find it pretty easily, and they're available usually all the time. Paid opportunities also exist. There's an old, Quaker school in like Ramallah or Bethlehem that has been around since the mid 1800s, and it's ranked one of the best schools in the region. And that's definitely probably going to be a competitive school that pays decently and allows you to live there. Israel has maybe slightly more limited opportunities, and most of the opportunities are sort of catered to folks who are Jewish, who can, maybe qualify for the right of return visa, and that can help you get there. But opportunities definitely exist if you're not Jewish. So I'm not saying that you must be Jewish, but it's just easier. Teaching English online is a very good option if you sort of just want to hang out in the region and not necessarily teach at a physical school, but you want to live there, you want to experience it. Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, all these beautiful cities, you want to be there. You can teach online and sort of figure out your visa situation similar to Egypt.
All right. Now that we've covered some of these awesome job markets, let's talk about TEFL certification. Bottom line is TEFL certification is key. Again, you don't have to have prior teaching experience or a degree in education to teach English abroad or to teach English in the Middle East, but taking an accredited TEFL class will provide you, one, with the skills you need to actually teach and run a classroom and prepare lessons and provide your students with a great educational experience. And it's a qualification that employers are looking for when they hire teachers. So it's just going to be really tough to get a job teaching English in the Middle East without a TEFL certification, unless you have, let's say, a master's degree in education or TESOL or something like that. But let's discuss some of the options that we offer here at International TEFL Academy, and we'll start with the online class. So our 170-hour online class, it's widely recognized as the gold standard for TEFL online TEFL certification across the field. This is an 11-week part-time class. It's really designed to accommodate people who are working or going to school full-time. So it's an interactive class. That said, there's no required live times. You don't have to log on a particular hour where you may be at work or at school. You can work according to your own schedule. These classes are capped at 20 students. They're taught by university level instructors. Again, they possess at least a master's degree and typically a PhD as well. This is all of our classes are accredited by internationally known authorities. And this class includes a practicum. So even though it's an online class, you will engage in live practice teaching to get hands-on experience and to build your confidence in a live teaching environment. So we certify more than 5,000 students a year. I'd say 80% of them take the class online. So this is typically the first option that many people take when it comes to getting certified with ITA.
All right, next up we have our in-person TEFL classes. They are all 4-week classes. We have over 20 locations all over the world. Usually we recommend getting certified in person if you plan to teach in that country, but it's always an option even if you don't. So you could technically take a TEFL class in South America and then get hired in the Middle East, because TEFL certification is not region or country specific. Here in the US, we have here in Chicago, where I am reporting from right now, our home base, our headquarters, we have a Chicago class, and it's amazing. It happens right adjacent to where we have our offices. And so us advisors, we get to interact with students. So if you're in the area, you're in the Midwest, or you're just willing to travel to Chicago, that could be a very good option. We also have a class that we offer through a partner in New York City. So if you're on the East Coast or you just want to spend some time in New York City, that is a good option. And if you want to be closer to the region so that you can get certified quicker through a 4-week class and then make your way over to whatever country, so long as it's not a country that hires in advance, we have an amazing class in Turkey, which is very popular, and our students love it, and they all remain sort of engaged and well connected with one another there. So a little bit more information about our in-person TEFL classes. They are intensive. We like to joke that they are a TEFL boot camp. So you should expect that, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 sort of thing, some days even longer if you have students coming in for practicum. So it's full-time. It is a full-time commitment, and you will be going over at least 100 hours of coursework and at least 6 hours of practicum. This varies from different campuses that we have around the world. You might have more, coursework. You might have more practicum. It really depends on our campus. Professional instructors who have at least a master's degree, again, same as our instructors for our online class. All of our in-person classes are accredited by internationally known authorities at the highest level, which is a level 5, which is equivalent to university level training. On average, our in-person classes typically have a cap of about 12 students. And so there is a lot of, very, very good opportunities to interact with your teachers and instructors for more feedback, for advice, because it's a small group and there's usually 1, sometimes 2 instructors. And so you really get that sort of healthy ratio of students to teachers. Tuition ranges, so you could be at about $1,599, $1,600 on the low end, going up to $2,500 US for some of our more expensive classes. And a lot of that has to do with, rent of a space in that particular city, what professors typically get paid in that particular country, and things like that.
All right, great. All right, job search guidance. So this is key. Obviously, applying for jobs can be intimidating and confusing in any field, not just when you're trying to get a job in Kuwait or Egypt or Dubai or what have you. So here at ITA, we've all worked and taught and so forth abroad. We've been through this experience. We understand the challenges of this part of the process, and that's why we're super proud to have our student affairs team. This is a team of experienced folk. They've all been working in this field for years. They have tons of experience and familiarity with these job markets, and they're there to work with our students and graduates and help them on a personal basis navigate the job search process. So that is lifetime for all of our students and graduates. So that means that you can access those resources and assistance at any time. And Ahmed will go over it in a little bit more detail here.
Absolutely. So our student affairs team has a ton of experience. They've taught all over the world in different places. And so, bottom line, we at ITA have been in your shoes before. And we have gone through the experience ourselves, whether it's applying and interviewing in advance or interviewing in a country and then visas and everything. So you're only going to be working with experts from the very beginning and all the way through. our student affairs team will provide you individualized guidance and attention. You can work with them on a one-on-one basis, and it is very, very comprehensive. So here's just a brief overview, some of the ways that we will be assisting you from our job search guidance and things like that. So some of the key offerings is resume and cover letter assistance. As you know, the rest of the world usually asks for a CV. So we will help you sort of take the resume that you have and update it to meet international CV standards and make sure that that and your cover letter are highlighting the right things that we know that employers are looking for, things like that. You'll also receive personalized advice from your own job search advisor, as well as, in many cases, your admissions advisor, who you'll probably be working with very closely up until the point where you enroll. That person is usually also willing to give you insight based on their own experience, so long as it's not technical stuff. Student affairs will work with you one-on-one on all of those things, visas and all of that. They regularly have live webinars like this one, but for alumni only and more targeted about more specific topics, as well as trainings and workshops. You receive some very amazing internal job search resources that you will have access to. These are resources that are constantly updated. They live online. You can access them at any time and forever. We have the connections and experience to help connect you to employers and recruiters around the world for free. So we're not charging you any extra fees for connecting you to employers or recruiters. It's something that we do because we have the ability to do that. And the job search guidance is for life. It never expires. We're not going to help you get a job once in Egypt and then disappear. We will continue to help you no matter how many times you want to find work abroad, whether that's starting in the Middle East and then moving to Asia and then moving to Europe, or only if you want to do this for a year, whatever, a gap year between your undergrad and your grad school or whatever it is. We will be able to assist you in any way for life.
All right. So I think we've covered most of the basics here about teaching English in the Middle East. Ahmed, if people want to get started, what do they need to do and what are their next steps?
Absolutely. Step one, talk to your advisor. That might be me. It might be another one of my awesome and amazing colleagues. All of us really and truly care about this, not only because we've done this, but because we are passionate about education and about travel. It is who we are at ITA. Talk to your advisor, contact them. You probably got a lot of emails from them. Get in touch with them, set up a time to talk, and you can ask all of your questions. You can have every topic you want to discuss covered. You can raise your apprehensions and concerns, and that could be discussed as well. So that's step one. Talk to your advisor, contact them, and get the ball rolling. Step two is getting certified. That is literally the next step. It is deciding on a course format and a course start date that makes sense for you and your goals and your timeline and your finances, and picking it and committing, because once you've committed to your plan, then you will feel like you want to follow through with your plan. You will feel committed to something, and you'll know that you're working towards a bigger goal of getting to the Middle East or anywhere else. And then the final step, and the most obvious one, is experiencing the world as a paid English teacher in the Middle East, being able to sort of bask in all of the amazing culture and traditions and foods and things we've been discussing since the beginning of this broadcast. That's it. Talk to your advisor, start the certification process, get TEFL certified, and we will help you land an awesome job in the Middle East.
That's right. And I would just add to that, getting certified is really the critical step to making this happen. One thing to note is that you typically want to get certified at least 3-6 months, maybe even longer in advance of when you plan on going abroad, so that you have time to, one, get certified, and two, work on your job search with your student affairs advisors. That process can take any number of months, as we've been discussing here. So plan in advance, talk to your advisor, put together a timeline, and before you know it, you'll be eating, kebabs in Istanbul or what have you. Ahmed, I know people, they have a lot of questions about teaching English in the Middle East.
Totally.
For some people, it can be a slightly intimidating region. Let's cover some of the questions that people typically bring up about teaching English abroad. And
Absolutely.
as we all know, the Middle East is always in the news. There's always something going on. People just want to know sometimes flat out, hey, is it actually safe for me to go to Dubai? Is it safe for me to go to a place like Tunisia or Egypt or Jordan or what have you? How do you address that question when it comes up when you're discussing it with people, Ahmed?
Yeah, totally. I think like any other part of the world, there are some places to go and other places to avoid. I That could be said about the city of Chicago here. There are neighborhoods you just might not want to go to, and other neighborhoods where it's totally fine to walk around all alone at 3 in the morning. So it depends, right? There are, countries in the Persian Gulf are absolutely safe, actually the safest in the world. I believe Abu Dhabi was ranked the #1 safest city in the world last year, which is cool to know. I mean, in my time, 5 years in the UAE, I never locked our apartment door or my car once. I used to even leave my car keys in the car unlocked, and I never even thought twice about it, and my car was never stolen. So safety, totally, totally. Especially in the Persian Gulf and some of these like very modern cities, absolutely. There are maybe some hesitations that some people might have for places in North Africa or the Levant. I think those are founded sometimes, but also these are beautiful and most of the time safe countries that have a lot to offer. And this is the case with our alumni who are there, who are having an awesome time and have sort of lived all over the region. Uh, if safety is a concern, definitely discuss with your advisor about the specifics of each country. Consult with, U.S. government websites or whatever website that might have warnings about going to and maybe avoiding certain places. But otherwise, it's like the rest of the world. It's not a sort of far away and mysterious and scary land.
Yeah, and it's not a homogeneous region. It's not as if there's, if there's an issue, let's say in Yemen, it's not going to affect safety throughout the region. And
Totally.
I think it's like any place else. Just you become familiar with your surroundings, do your research. You'll make a lot of friends when you move to these places. They'll be happy to sort of show you the ropes in terms of, hey, this is what you should know when you go out at night or what have you. And sort of segueing into the next question, I think people sometimes wonder, they have notions about, gender segregation in the Middle East and so forth, and they wonder, hey, I'm a female, I'm a woman, I want to teach in the Middle East. Is it even possible? And the answer is definitely yes. Even in Saudi Arabia, the most, let's say one of the most conservative countries in the region, there are lots of opportunities for women. In fact, in some of these cases, schools are separated by gender, classes are separated by gender, and there are lots of opportunities that are actually gender specific for women and for men. And it's just going to vary from country to country, how things work when it comes to gender relations and so forth. Ahmed, do you have anything to add to that, or how does it, what do you say when people bring up this sort of question?
Yeah. No, I think that is a fair concern, and I think a lot of people have that concern, especially women, before as they're considering that region. In my experience, it is not only possible, but it is actually probably more common in schools in Dubai to find single women who are there on their own living and teaching there. That was the case for me at the school that I taught in. As a matter of fact, we left Dubai, my wife and I, and then we returned again, except my wife went out before me the second time around and with our son, and she was able to have him sponsored under her visa without me being there, and there was nothing weird going on. So totally common, and yes, not a problem at all.
Right. I think one other question that we get all the time, not just about the Middle East, but people who want to go to let's say Korea or Germany or, somewhere in Latin America, Argentina or what have you. And people always want to know, hey, do I have to speak the local language to go teach English in these places? And do I have to know, for example, Arabic if I want to teach English in the Middle East? And that's a definite no. You don't have to know the local language in the vast
Not at
majority of
all.
cases, correct? They're hiring you because you're an English speaker, because you're TEFL certified, because you're trained to teach English, not because you do or don't, you speak, a year of college Arabic or what have you. Certainly, if you want to work on your language schools for Arabic, this is a great way to do it. And it's worth noting, in a lot of these countries, a lot of folks already speak English. So when it comes to getting around, you're going to be interacting with a lot of other English speakers, both other expatriates or Americans, other folks teaching or working in other fields. I know there was a huge American community in Cairo when I was growing up. We had American schools and churches and community organizations. We had softball leagues,
Oh yeah.
dart leagues, and God knows what else. So in most cases, you're going to have opportunities to, socialize with other English speakers. But it's always good to learn at least some of the local language just for getting around and to be polite and to expand your own horizons. Ahmed, do you have anything to add to that particular question?
Yeah, I mean, this again applies to anywhere in the world, but full immersion, full English immersion is what you want for your students in the classroom. I am a semi-fluent Arabic speaker myself. My comprehension is totally fluent. My spoken is a little bit broken, but nonetheless, even with that, I sort of didn't allow myself. I was discouraged from using any Arabic at all in the classroom when I first started teaching in Dubai. And that was mostly for students to not use it as a crutch and depend on it and then that would take away from their English language learning. So you definitely want to keep that in mind, that even if you know the local language, it might be fine to show off with a word or two in the class, but you don't want students to get a sense that they can use Arabic in the classroom, because that'll take away from the whole reason why you're there, which is teaching them English.
That's right. A question that we get frequently, again, for people interested in going to all parts of the world, including the Middle East, is, are there age restrictions? And I think this is, for the most part, there are going to be, in some countries where there are going to be sort of mandatory retirement ages and so forth. So it can be an issue in some cases. I would say, for the most part, don't let it discourage you. If you're like me and you're a little bit, you're on the north side of 40 or 50 or even
Oh, you're
60.
not old, John.
Um, but Ahmed, what do how do you handle when somebody asks you about, age restrictions and teaching English in the Middle East? I think people should always be as open-minded and flexible as possible, and that will
Totally.
give them the most opportunities.
Yeah, I think some of the more competitive and some of the more competitive countries, like the ones in the Gulf that have more strict requirements, are more likely to enforce a retirement age for locals and foreigners alike. So keep that in mind, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. I taught with in the same school as teachers who were definitely in their 60s. So in Dubai. So it's definitely possible that 50s and 60s, it is possible. You might have to work a little bit harder, be a little bit more patient, be a little bit more flexible in terms of what city you end up in or what country you want to go to. And definitely a lot more common in other parts of the Middle East, like North Africa and the Levant.
Okay, we're just about here, but I just wanted to bring up, a couple more questions. Again, people sometimes have monolithic pictures under their head of, what life is like in the Middle East, and people are wondering, hey, if I'm a woman and I move to the Middle East, am I going to have to wear, a hijab, or am I going to have to wear a veil, or, you know, can I get a beer if I'm in the Middle East? I hear they don't, they don't allow alcohol. Um, and I would say, from my experience, certainly in most cases, no, you're not going to have to wear a hijab. Certainly not a veil in most cases, but there are certain circumstances where it may be the case, and you should be flexible and do some learning about, how things work in particular countries that you're interested in. Certainly in places like Egypt, I'd say in a city like Cairo, half the women wear Western style clothing, half the women wear more traditional clothing. Barely none of them are ever veiled. It's just going to depend on, what they feel comfortable. But certainly as a foreigner teaching English there or working there in some other capacity, women, American and other Western women never felt compelled to sort of, adapt the local clothing. Though I would say in most cases in the Middle East, you typically want to be a little bit more conservative in what you wear, just in general, at least when you're out in public. There is nightlife in a lot of these places. I was going to discos when I was 16 in Cairo and whooping it up. Again, it's going to depend. Some countries are dry, but most of them, certainly alcohol is at least available, and there is nightlife, and you can go out on the town. There are casinos in some of these places. There are beaches where women go and wear bikinis. So it's not as monolithic as people might think in their heads of what life in the Middle East is like. Ahmed, what are from your wide experience in the region, how do you address these sorts of questions when they come up, and what's your personal experience?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's definitely fair to have concerns about whether or not you will have fun in a place. I think that might be the reason why some people feel maybe discouraged from or deterred from going to considering this region, just because they think, well, will it be fun? Will I just be teaching all day and then trapped at home the rest of the day? Like, no, that's not what it's like. That's not what any part of the world is like. Having lived in, having spent summers in Jordan, growing up and experienced all types of things, met all sorts of people, expats and locals alike, who are all interested in all types of things, you will find a subculture or a thing that you are interested in for sure. I mean, Dubai is probably the most Western and most modern city in the Middle East. And there's everything, literally everything, pubs and clubs and art galleries. And I know that that's also a thing in Jordan. That is definitely by far a thing in Beirut. You can definitely even find that in, Israel and Palestine, definitely in Egypt. Anywhere in the region, you will most likely find something that you are interested in doing. There will be a nightlife. There will be cultural things that you can relate with. You will find people who are like-minded. And that goes for literally anywhere in the world where we would, send people where there's a teaching market. Because for one, these cities are being influenced by expats, people like you who are moving there and bringing their own culture. And two, that's kind of meshing with local culture. So you have this very cool blend of things happening. And yeah, it should not be a concern. I understand why it is, but having spent considerable time there, I can assure you that there is a ton of things to do. Being sensitive of cultural differences is going to be important, but that applies anywhere in the world, right? You wouldn't go to a country in Asia and disrespect everyone, right? And the Middle East is no different. It's the same in Europe. It's the same in South America. And so just being mindful of customs and traditions and learning to accept the differences and even embrace them in many cases, that is going to be key for your success anywhere in the world, and overcoming things like culture shock and eventually enjoying and even maybe falling in love with a place.
Yeah, I think it's worth, pointing out big picture that, a lot of these societies, they've been interacting with Europe and the West literally since the beginning of time. They've been conquering each other, trading with each other,
Totally.
sharing and borrowing culture and religion and so forth. So yeah, I think it's, I think the key is always to do your research, do some homework, and be open-minded. I think it is, in my experience, I've been to 50 countries around the world. Middle Easterners in particular, the Arabs are some of the warmest and friendliest and most welcoming people I've ever met. And, I think most people find that to be the case. You know, and it's one reason why so many people, like my family, go to that part of the world and become attached, literally for, you know, years and years and years. So, yeah, don't be intimidated. Do your research, and you'll be fine. Ahmed, I think
Yep,
we've run out of time here.
that is it.
Thanks so much, Shukran, for sharing all your insights.
Shukran.
It's been a
Shukran.
fantastic broadcast. And yeah, anything else you want to say before we sign off here?
That's it. Contact your ITA advisor and have a chat with them. That's what all of us are here for.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and stay in touch.
All right. Peace.